There is nothing more obnoxious than YouTubers complaining about how hard it is to be a YouTuber. That is the most conceited, self-obsessed, and ridiculous thing a person can do, and this video is not meant to be that. I want to make that very clear from the outset. I realize the title might make it seem that way, but that's not what this video is. This video is really meant to just tell a story. Tell the story of myself and my YouTube channel, which has been on a bit of a decline recently, and how I've kind of come to a bit of a realization that some of the decisions that I've been making, specifically with trying to appease the YouTube algorithm and to do something to survive on this platform, has actively made my content worse. I'm not trying to complain about the algorithm or about YouTube itself. Like, these systems are in place and it's my own fault for interfacing with them in a bad way, if you want to call it that. But I kind of want to just tell this story because I think that firstly, my viewers might be curious about why it is there's been a bit of a shift in my content recently, as well as this is something that's pretty relevant to most YouTubers, if not all YouTubers on this platform. So you might find it interesting. If you're new here, hey, how's it going? My name's GBay99. I've been a YouTuber for about 8 years now, going on 9 years. I have been making League of Legends YouTube videos that entire time, but this story really starts maybe 2 or 3 years ago. When I first got into League of Legends and making content about the game, I started off with the basic stuff, how to play the game, doing gameplay videos, all that kind of thing, and I found a decent amount of success with that for a long period of time, but around 3 years ago, I kind of came to the realization I don't want to do that my entire life. There are other avenues that I play League of Legends and show that to my fans. I stream, of course, and if people really want to be seeing me play the game, they can of course do that through all sorts of different ways. But I realized that on YouTube, I don't want to just be uploading stream highlights. I don't want to just be uploading boring gameplay videos. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more creatively fulfilling for myself. And so I started exploring making videos that I kind of called documentaries on League of Legends, videos that tell stories about League of Legends and its esports scene specifically, and some of the most interesting stories that oftentimes go untold within the scene because people don't explore these stories that frequently. So I kind of started shifting away from making gameplay videos and getting into documentaries. The first few documentaries I made got loads of views. I mean, even if you're not a fan of mine, you probably saw some of these recommended in your YouTube recommendation page if you spent any time on the platform at all and are like tangentially interested in gaming whatsoever. And these videos did really well, but some of them didn't do so well, so I still kind of supplemented them with gameplay for another year or so. But the gameplay videos I was making were getting very, very poor views by the end of it. I think people were sick of gameplay as much as I was, so eventually I committed to saying, okay, I want to seriously be making high quality content, no more pumping out garbage for viewership. I really want to become someone who makes something on YouTube that I can really be proud of and be excited about making and excited about showing to my audience. So that's what I start doing, and it starts off as a tremendous success. Around this time, Afrika, the team in South Korea, one of the top teams in Korea, invited me out to Korea to make a documentary on their team, and that was a really cool experience that kind of coincided with this decision to full-on go in on making high-quality videos. So I made a couple of videos about that trip, and my Afrika Freaks documentary did very well. I really got into the idea of saying, let's make documentaries, and I just hit the ground running, and a few of them turned out very well. The Ocelot G2 documentary was I think one of the first ones I made, and one of the more successful ones. It's at like 750,000 views, and was a video that I was both really proud of with how it turned out, and something that the wider League of Legends community seemed to really enjoy as well. I also made the Dignitas documentary, a documentary on the history of Dignitas and especially their early years in North America, and how they shaped a lot of the North American scene when it was about to become so boring. People were about to start watching the game. They kind of saved a League of Legends, and so I made a big documentary on them. That there were a couple of mistakes in each of those documentaries. I worked on them like every day, 16 hours a day, but I still only made them in like maybe a month. It might have taken a month each of work. So, I mean, a lot of hours put in, but over a relatively short period of time. So there definitely were flaws, but it was clear that it was something that people were enjoying. I mean, I was making these videos, people were really latching onto them and responding well. I also threw in a couple of shorter videos more around the 20-minute range. I did one on the history of Shushay, who was one of the early Season 1 stars, and his experience pulling out AP Alistar mid lane to win Season 1 Worlds. I did one on Huang Fong, the AD carry from China who grew up homeless, abandoned by his parents, but turned into one of the best AD carries in the world. An incredible story there. And I also did like a video on wildcards and the history of all the success they've had at Worlds and international events, knocking out major regions even when they had no business doing so. And talking about all these different stories was a really enjoyable experience for me and something that I thought people were really latching on to, so I tried to go full steam ahead and making those kinds of videos. Around this period of time, I also experimented with some other similar kinds of content. I did a video that talked about the history of the League of Legends forums and the craziness that went on before we kind of had the Reddit system we have today. I also did a video that was on, I did one that kind of talked about all the different aspects to the amateur scene in North America and how development in North America, generally speaking, at least before those videos, was really, really terrible. Local talent had no real way to rise up through the ranks, and I tried to shine a bit of a spotlight on some of the amateur leagues and some of the amateur stars that were really on their way up and potentially able to climb their way up to the LCS and be the stars of tomorrow. And some of these videos, I really enjoyed making them again, but some of them didn't get the best viewership, but it kind of gave me a view of a baseline. Like, as a YouTuber, you always have two different audiences you're trying to appease. Firstly, you're trying to appease your core subscribers, the people that will watch your videos no matter what, and will always come and watch anything you upload. But then you're also trying to appease strangers, the algorithm, the new viewers that might come across a video when it's recommended to them. So you kind of think about creating videos in two different senses. You think that, oh, this is going to be a video that's going to explode on YouTube. It has the potential to reach a wider audience beyond my core subscribers. Or you think, I'm just going to make something that's really exciting and fun for me to make, and I'm going to make it specifically for my core subscribers, and I don't care if it doesn't get any views beyond that, but it's going to be something that's really fulfilling for me to make. And making some of those smaller projects that were a bit weirder kind of gave me the inclination that I had a core subscriber base of around 100,000 viewers or so, that if I uploaded a video that was about something that wasn't super clickbaity or whatever, that it would get about 100,000 views kind of no matter what, something around there at least. And so that was kind of the expectation I had going forward. And I started thinking that, you know, I want to explore some ideas that might be a bit more niche, but that are really, really interesting stories worth telling. One of those videos was the best League of Legends players you never knew, exploring some of the interesting history of early season stars that at times were arguably the best in the world at their position, but who never really got to have the explosive success and future careers of the Ocelots and Double Fs and Bjergsons and all the other players that they played alongside. And that video, similarly, it didn't quite hit 100,000 views, but I was expecting it would perform a little bit poorly. So that video was still something that I was somewhat happy with. But then I worked really hard on a very big documentary that was supposed to be my third big kind of feature-length video, which was the IPL 5 documentary. IPL 5, for those of you unaware, is widely regarded as the best tournament that's ever existed in League of Legends. The best tournament ever. It had a very short runtime of like 4 or 5 days, but the format that was used by IPL to create all these different interregional matchups, and I mean, I talk about it in the video itself, but that for many different reasons, that tournament is kind of a mythical event in League of Legends history as the greatest tournament that all future events measure up to try and capture that same level of success. And that video did so poorly. After 3 days of being live, it had 31,000 views, which was shocking to me. I mean, normally when I see a video that's like an hour long that gets uploaded, I assume that a lot of work went into it, that it's a really big, exciting project worth paying attention to, you know? And I was distraught that my core subscribers apparently had no interest in the subject material, and actually maybe my like ride or die fan base was much smaller than I initially thought. That video, it took like a month to make. I put a lot of effort into it, although there definitely could be faults, I'm sure, that you could pick apart with it. But I thought that it wasn't necessarily any worse than like the Ocelot or Dignitas documentaries. But it was really disappointing for me to see that it performed so poorly. And so I made a community post where I just straight up asked my audience, like, hey, do you guys like have no interest in the content? Was the video poorly made? Like, what am I missing? What did I get wrong with this release? Because this video is getting such poor viewership compared to everything else I've made for the past, year or whatever. Is there any reason why you aren't watching? And ironically enough, that weird community post kind of went somewhat viral and was getting recommended all across YouTube to people that had no interest or had never heard of me or never even watched League of Legends before. And ironically, that ended up boosting the views back up to 100,000, which was weird. What I kind of learned from this experience, though, was that I am not a YouTuber that's successful. I mean, I might have an audience. I might be able to get, 31,000 people watching a video is a very large number of people. But in terms of, being someone that can upload anything and, have the trust of my audience that it's going to be something entertaining so they'll watch it no matter what, I'm not quite at that level. I'm not the kind of YouTuber that once I upload something, it immediately gets a ton of people flocking to it because they're like, whoa, new video. I need to pander, maybe pander's the wrong word, but I need to make sure that my content is still like proving that it's worth watching to people, I guess is maybe the best way to phrase it. And so essentially what I tried to start doing was I realized maybe I can't make videos on whatever I want to. Maybe I need to really pay attention to the subject material that I choose and really try and make things that are eye-catching, that are clickbaity, that are really fun for people to see. And that's what I started doing with my next few videos. I made a video on Certainly T, the designer that's probably the most infamous rioter in the history of League of Legends. I made a video on Blitzcrank and the fact that he has a 100% win rate from top lane in professional play, which is weird and a fun stat that gives a lot of excuse to talk about all these interesting periods of history in League of Legends with regards to metas and whatnot. And then I also made a video on Teemo and the most infamous champion in League of Legends and all the various different pro players over the years who have used him to great success against other top professionals, which is kind of insane and very impressive. And so these videos didn't do that well at first, but they still eventually ended up climbing up to some very, very respectable viewership, right? I was able to get a decent audience again. I felt like I was okay, maybe trending in the right direction. But what this experience taught me, I realize now in retrospect, was a bad lesson, which is that the title and thumbnail is more important than the content. That's what I learned from that. Doesn't matter how good the content is or how bad the content is. Title and thumbnail is everything, and subject selection as well is more important than anything at all. So this is when I started kind of viewing what a lot of other people were doing on YouTube as well. I tried to really see like what is it that people are doing who are finding success on YouTube, and what can I maybe take away in terms of lessons from them. And I realized something that I don't know if you guys agree with this, but from my perspective, I feel like there's a lot of YouTube channels out there that can really succeed even though they don't have substance. In other words, if you have a really clickbaity title and thumbnail, and the content in the video is just very polished, very flashy, you don't actually have to have good content, but as long as it looks good and you can get people clicking it, then you can find a lot of success on YouTube. Those are kind of some of the channels I see blowing up. And this isn't to take shots on anyone. I'm not specifically even talking about the League of Legends community. I'm talking like if you look at the people that talk about cryptocurrencies or banking and inflation and stock market crashes and conspiracies, like there's a lot of people on YouTube that can make videos about these things that they don't understand at all. Like people that very clearly are kind of conspiratorial and don't really have a fundamental understanding of the basics of economics or, these subjects that they're speaking about. They don't really have substantive content, but because they have really clickbaity titles and flashy thumbnails and very polished editing, they can get people clicking on their video. People will just be visually entertained, even if the information they're receiving isn't necessarily the best or most accurate. And those channels can find a lot of success on YouTube. And this is something that kind of warped my perception about what it is I should be doing when making videos myself. After coming to this realization, I started making more and more videos that I would intentionally choose a subject that wasn't necessarily because I was interested in it, but because it made for a good story that could have a good title and thumbnail. A great example is the AAA story, Against All Authority, who was one of the best teams in the history of League of Legends in terms of player talent, but who fought amongst each other so much that it eventually turned into a literal fist fight where one of their players got a black eye from another one of their players. Like, that's a really interesting story, and I've specifically made a documentary on that because it's such an eye-catching, attention-grabbing story that I thought could do well on YouTube. That video did not really do super well. Ironically enough, you want to see something funny? For the longest time, that video had this thumbnail. And the video wasn't doing that well. It had like 100,000 views, which I thought was, that's pretty good, much better than 31,000. But I thought that it was a more interesting subject than just a general any old video. So then I changed the thumbnail to this. And then this is what happened to the views. It immediately shot up. Like, it is so ridiculous to me how frustrating it is. You really have to like trick people into watching your videos. And that's really what can be the difference between 100,000 views. I mean, that video right now is sitting at like 225,000 views or something. I doubled the viewership by changing a color. That was really shocking to me. This all taught me some terrible lessons. I started immediately thinking about clickbaity titles, clickbaity thumbnails. I made a video on the 3 greatest comebacks in the history of League of Legends, which was like almost basically a top 10 video, that level of quality on YouTube. I also made a video on Martin Shkreli, the guy who was the Pharma Bro dude who ended up going to jail after being arrested by the FBI for securities fraud. And when he was going through the massive healthcare scandal, he owned a League of Legends team that came a hair's width away from qualifying for the LCS. Like, that is a crazy story as well. And these stories are interesting, right? I mean, I'm smiling and getting excited just talking about them, reliving making those videos. But I think the thing that I was making a mistake with was I was really getting too invested and excitable about the subject material with regards to titles and thumbnails and trying to be as attention grabbing as possible. And I wasn't focusing as much on making the videos as quality as possible. I was really like cutting a lot of corners basically on the storyboarding, on the outlining, on the research and scripting and how I was putting the story together, which I would originally spend so many hours doing with some of the older documentaries. I was cutting a lot of corners because I thought it didn't matter anymore, All I needed was to have flashy titles and thumbnails and then flashy editing. But some of these videos definitely were still getting fewer and fewer views. So then I thought, okay, well, the next step, it's not to go back to making good stories or spending a lot of time on the research and whatnot. It's to get better with editing. That's when I made an Akali video, a documentary on the history of Akali, because a lot of you guys said that you have no interest whatsoever in watching esports anymore. You were getting burnt out, or that's what my audience told me, at least. People said they were getting burnt out on esports stuff. So I made a video on a champion documentary on the history of Akali, and I spent a lot of time specifically trying to learn After Effects, which is something that I had very minimal knowledge of beforehand. So I spent a lot of time learning how to do all the different 3D camera work in After Effects to make flat images appear 3D and do highlighting effects and all that kind of stuff. And I spent a lot of time trying to work on upping that polish, but it wasn't enough. Apparently that video did horribly. Even now it's sitting at like 40,000 views or something. And yeah, that turned into a bit of a failure. And then this all culminated in the most recent video I put out, which was the real reason China and Korea are so good at League of Legends. This video was meant to be an exploration between the cultural differences between the Eastern and Western regions in League. For those of you that don't know, when people ask, like, why is China and Korea so good at League? Why are Western teams so bad by comparison? People always talk about culture difference. That's what they say the reason is, but people never really, that's such a vague phrase that doesn't tell you anything. That video was specifically meant to talk about what the culture differences are that lend to Eastern regions being so much more successful. And generally speaking, that video, I really had a lot of fun making that video and was really excited about it during the creation process. I got to read all these interesting books and articles and papers online and learn all these different things about Eastern history and Eastern culture. But part of the process of making a YouTube video for me was I cut a lot of that info out of the video. I thought, oh, I got to keep this moving fast. I can't lose my audience retention. I got to keep people watching. So I cut out a lot of the info that gave further explanation and background and sources and whatnot for what I was referencing to get to the League of Legends part as quickly as possible. And so that video, again, is not performing the best on the main channel. And a lot of people mistook what I was trying to say. People, I think I didn't communicate the ideas I was trying to say super well, unfortunately, which was a bit of a shame. But that's where my channel stands today. I have not broken 100,000 views in like 2 months, 3 months or something. It's been a while. I have struggled with viewership. I've struggled with retaining an audience. My audience is shrinking. People are unsubscribing, and I'm on a terrible downward spiral. And it all came from me trying to find success on YouTube. It all came from me trying to find some level of viewership and like what it would take to get people watching my videos. And that took my attention away from the quality of the videos themselves. And I think that the things I value very highly, the stories specifically, I mean, the whole reason I started making these documentaries and whatnot is because I feel like there's a lot of interesting stories in League of Legends that are not told or have not been told very well. And these stories aren't any less interesting than the stories you see being made on TV with like traditional sports. I mean, these are just as exciting, if not more so, than a lot of the traditional stories that you'll hear from various different sporting worlds. And I feel like they deserve some time in the limelight. And that was like the initial idea and the passion that kind of kickstarted a lot of the videos I wanted to make. And I think I kind of lost that because I got so busy chasing numbers. And I think that's something that a lot of YouTubers can probably experience or probably fall down a hole. Like, this is something probably every YouTuber falls into eventually, where you start realizing that the content itself isn't necessarily as important as the title, the thumbnail, the audience retention, the polish of the editing. So you start focusing on things that are not as important as they deserve your attention for, right? Some people might find success doing that, but their content suffers. And then some people, like myself, only end up hurting their content and their viewership and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to make this video to kind of explain to my audience, like, this is kind of what's been happening to me. I don't know what it is you guys have been feeling. I don't know if you've like specifically maybe stopped watching some of my videos because you feel like they aren't as interesting or if they aren't as well done. And that's the change that has happened. There has been a change in these past 6 months or a year, however long it's been now. I have been spending less time on the scripting, on the storyboarding, on the outlining process, and there's a lot of different steps that go into making a YouTube video, obviously, and doubly so for the super long documentaries I make. But that's kind of where I've been, and that's the shift that I've been making in the production, the way that I produce videos. And I think you guys, instinctively or not, maybe have recognized that and why you've stopped watching. And I think that that's something I need to work on. And so, I mean, this has been my full-time job. You know, part of the reason I care about numbers is because my content's not good enough to get support on like a Patreon. But I'm trying to make stuff that's still good enough that it's worth watching. And so I think future videos, I'm 100% really trying to go back to making documentaries that are about stories, that are really about improving the level of storytelling and giving these players and these stories the limelight that they really deserve, the dramatization that you deserve. And I hope that I can keep doing this. I hope that I can fix things. I hope it's not too late. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening to my story and for listening to me. If you somehow are not subscribed to me or are not already a fan or viewer of mine and you listen to all that, thank you very much. If you want to check out my main channel and all these videos I'm referencing, I'll give a link in the description down below. But if you are a fan of mine, if you are a viewer that wants to see me succeed, hopefully you do, I'm hopefully going to be getting back on the right path to doing so, and I hope you guys are looking forward to the content in the future, and I'll see you all then.